If you ever find yourself standing alone in a dim hotel bathroom after midnight, if your reflection doesn't blink when you do, if it starts to whisper your name, leave. Because some mirrors don't just reflect your face. They keep a ledger of everything you've ever tried to forget. Rebecca Graves never believed in curses. She had spent 10 years working for Cormack and Harlan Insurance, investigating fraud, assessing damage claims, listening to 100 different excuses for why policies should pay out. In her line of work, everything had an explanation. A leak was just a leak. A crack was just a crack. And superstition was an indulgence she couldn't afford. It was late October when she arrived at the Wycliffe Inn. A brooding, 3-story Victorian manor crouched on the edge of Seattle. She was there to finalize the claim for a kitchen fire. Just another line item in her overstuffed ledger. She planned to stay one night, maybe 2. Martin Holloway, the innkeeper, greeted her in the dim lobby. He was a thin man in his 70s, with translucent skin and eyes that didn't quite meet hers. "You're Ms. Graves?" he rasped. "Yes." "Rebecca, thank you for holding the room." "Of course," he said. "You'll be in 217, best room in the house." He slid the brass key across the counter. His hand trembled. "Hasn't been occupied in some time," he added, almost as an afterthought. "But it's quite special." Rebecca didn't ask what he meant. She was tired, and the lobby smelled of old varnish and something darker beneath, mildew or regret. Room 217 was at the end of the second-floor hallway. The door creaked when she pushed it open. The space was larger than she expected. High ceilings, faded damask wallpaper, a 4-poster bed draped in moth-eaten curtains. But it was the bathroom that caught her attention. The mirror over the sink stretched the length of the wall. An enormous rectangle framed in tarnished brass, the glass warped in places. When she turned on the overhead bulb, the mirror seemed to shimmer, like the surface of a pond rippling under invisible wind. She unpacked, opened her laptop, and tried to work. But her gaze kept drifting back to that mirror. Once, just once, she thought she saw movement behind her reflection. She told herself it was fatigue. The drive from Tacoma had been long, and she'd skipped dinner. By midnight, she gave up on her report and crawled into the creaky bed. At 2:13 a.m., she woke to the sound of running water. Half asleep, she staggered to the bathroom. The faucet was dry. But in the mirror, the tap was turned on. A thin stream flowing endlessly. Rebecca rubbed her eyes. When she looked again, the water had stopped. She was about to turn away when her reflection smiled. She hadn't moved. A chill swept over her. She lifted her hand, testing. Her reflection mirrored the motion, but the smile remained. She backed out of the bathroom, heart hammering. When she reached the bed, she hesitated, then turned back. The mirror was just a mirror again. Her reflection looked as frightened as she felt. The next morning, she convinced herself it was a dream. A trick of exhaustion. She spent the day photographing the fire damage in the kitchen, filling out forms. By dusk, she almost believed nothing had happened. Almost. That evening, she called Daniel Mercer, her closest friend and occasional partner on difficult claims. "Dan, have you ever heard of a place called the Wycliffe Inn?" "Can't say that I have. Why?" "It feels wrong here." "Wrong how?" "Like the walls are listening." A pause crackled down the line. "You sure you're okay?" "I don't know." She didn't mention the mirror. She didn't mention the smile. Some part of her was afraid that speaking of it would make it real. After the call, she stood in the doorway of the bathroom, studying her reflection in the dusk light. Her own eyes looked back at her. Flat, dark, tired, no smile this time. She left the light on when she went to bed. At 3:07 a.m., her phone vibrated on the nightstand. A text message from an unknown number. "I remember everything you've tried to forget." Her hands went cold. She looked at the mirror. Her reflection was gone. Instead, in the silver depths, she saw a little girl sitting cross-legged on the tile. Her skin was gray, her hair tangled in damp ropes. When the girl lifted her head, Rebecca staggered back a step, because the child had her face, only younger. Before she could speak, the image vanished. Her reflection returned, eyes wide with terror. She didn't sleep again. By morning, the text message had vanished. Rebecca scrolled through her phone, fingers numb. No record, no number, no proof. Maybe she'd dreamed it. But when she went into the bathroom, she found something she couldn't explain away. On the mirror's surface, traced in a thin film of condensation, were 4 words. "I remember your fire." She stared at them until her vision blurred. Her breath came shallow, her pulse hammering against her ribs. The memory rose unbidden. Smoke, heat, the shriek of the fire alarm, her own voice screaming her sister's name. 20 years had passed. She'd buried it under work and rationalizations. But the mirror knew. She lifted her hand and wiped the words away. Her palm came back slick and cold, as if the glass itself were sweating. She should have left then. Instead, she found herself sitting at the small writing desk by the window, laptop open, searching for any mention of room 217. It didn't take long. The Wycliffe Inn was old, built in 1889. Its history was peppered with stories that sounded like folklore. Strange disappearances, guests who checked out without ever opening the door, rumors of a craftsman who had built something called the memory mirror. The name sent a shiver across her shoulders. She clicked on a link to a digitized newspaper archive. The Seattle Herald, November 2nd, 1910. Local carpenter Joseph Emmerich completes commission for wealthy collector. A mirror said to capture not merely the image, but the truth of the soul. She skimmed further down the article, her mouth dry. Rumors abound that Emmerich's obsession with theosophy and spiritualist practice influenced his design. Witnesses claim the mirror never needed cleaning, as though it rejected the dust of the living. Rebecca rubbed her eyes. Dust of the living. She thought of the little girl on the tile. Her own face, impossibly young. Someone knocked on her door. She jumped, slamming the laptop shut. "Yes?" "Housekeeping, ma'am," a woman called softly. Rebecca hesitated, then crossed to the door and opened it. A maid in her 50s stood there, holding a fresh stack of towels. "May I—" "No, thank you," Rebecca said quickly. "I'm fine." But the woman didn't leave. Her gaze flicked past Rebecca's shoulder into the dim room. "You're in 217, she murmured. "Yes." The maid's face tightened. "Don't look too long," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "What?" "In the mirror. It remembers. And it don't forgive." Before Rebecca could respond, the maid turned and walked away, her shoes silent on the old carpet. She closed the door, heart thudding. The mirror seemed to hum in the silence. That afternoon, she tried to work. She forced herself to go downstairs, photograph the kitchen damage again, fill out forms. Martin Holloway hovered near the dining room, polishing a tarnished candelabra. She hesitated. "Mr. Holloway," she began, "how long has the mirror been in that room?" He looked up, his face gone pale. "Longer than I've been alive," he said. "It came with the place. Folks used to say it was cursed, but I don't hold with that." "Did you know about the writing?" He swallowed. "Writing?" "In the condensation. It spelled out words." Martin's hands clenched around the candelabra. "Best you don't pay it no mind, Miss Graves. You'll be gone soon enough." She opened her mouth to argue, but he turned and walked away. She spent the rest of the day in the lobby, working by the fire, anything to avoid the room. But as dusk fell, she felt a compulsion she couldn't deny, an invisible tether pulling her back upstairs. When she unlocked the door to 217, the first thing she saw was her suitcase. It had been moved. She was sure she'd left it by the wardrobe. Now it sat in the middle of the floor, as if someone, or something, had rummaged through it. She approached slowly. The zipper was open. Inside, her clothes were undisturbed. But nestled on top was something she hadn't packed. A small, gilt-edged photograph in a cracked leather frame. Her hands shook as she lifted it. It was a picture of her and her sister, taken the summer before the fire. She had never seen this photo before. Her sister's face looked out from the glass, smiling and oblivious. But in the background, almost hidden in shadow, stood a tall figure in a black coat, watching them. Rebecca's vision went black at the edges. She sank onto the bed, clutching the frame. When she looked up, the mirror seemed closer somehow, though she hadn't moved. She rose, crossing the room in 3 halting steps. Her reflection waited in the glass. But it wasn't alone. The little girl stood beside her, and this time, the child spoke. "You left me." Rebecca's throat closed. "I didn't. I tried to come back. You left me," the girl repeated, voice hollow as the grave. The mirror rippled, and in its depths, she saw the flames again, licking up the wallpaper, swallowing the sofa, her sister's tiny form still and silent. "Stop," she whispered. "Please, stop." The child only watched. It remembers everything? The room felt too small. Rebecca stumbled back, her heel catching on the edge of the carpet. She fell hard, the photograph skidding from her grasp. When she looked up, the mirror was only a mirror again, but her own reflection was smiling. She crawled to the bathroom door and pulled herself upright, bracing on the doorknob. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the child's voice one last time. "You can't leave until you see it all." Rebecca squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them, the mirror was dark. But she knew, somehow, that it was waiting. Rebecca didn't sleep. She sat cross-legged on the bed, the photograph clutched in her hands, the glow from her phone screen painting her face in cold light. She scrolled through the old newspaper archives she'd bookmarked. Each headline struck like a blow. 1912, family of 4 found dead in room 217. 1939, traveling salesman vanishes without a trace. 1971, Elaine Archer's disappearance remains unsolved. The same room, the same mirror. She forced herself to read every line. She needed to understand what she was facing. In the coroner's notes from 1912, a single sentence jumped out. All mirrors in the room were intact except for a single, hairline fracture in the frame above the sink, which bled a dark resinous fluid. Resinous fluid. Rebecca shivered. Somewhere past 4 a.m., she found a reference she hadn't seen before. An article in the Seattle Clarion dated April 15, 1930. Famed artisan Joseph Emmerich commissioned to create a unique-looking glass for railway magnate Elmer Harlan. Emmerich's design, which he called the memory mirror, was said to contain a secret layer of silver nitrate infused with an experimental binding agent. The craftsman claimed it would reflect the sum of a man's life. The article included a photograph. Joseph Emmerich stood beside the mirror, a gaunt figure in a black coat. Rebecca's stomach lurched. The man in the picture was the same figure she'd seen standing behind her and her sister in the photograph. She zoomed in on the image. Something about Emmerich's eyes made her skin crawl, like he was looking through the camera directly at her. When dawn finally came, she shut the laptop with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. She had to know more. At 9 a.m., she went downstairs. Martin Holloway was nowhere in sight. She found the housekeeper instead. The same woman who had warned her not to look too long. The woman was kneeling by the fireplace, polishing the brass fender. Rebecca cleared her throat. "Excuse me." The woman looked up, her expression guarded. "Yes, ma'am?" "You said something yesterday about the mirror, that it remembers." "What did you mean?" The woman's mouth pressed into a thin line. "I shouldn't be talking about it." "Please," Rebecca whispered. "I think it's trying to hurt me." For a long moment, the woman said nothing. Then she set down the rag and sat back on her heels. "My grandmother worked here," she said slowly. "She used to tell me stories about the mirror, about the man who built it." "Joseph Emmerich," the woman nodded. "He wasn't right. Some said he was brilliant. Some said he was touched by the devil. But everyone agreed. He wanted to make something that would last forever." Rebecca swallowed. "Why? Why a mirror?" "Because it was the easiest way to collect souls." The words hung between them like smoke. Rebecca felt the room tilt. "Souls?" The woman glanced over her shoulder, as if to make sure they were alone. "They said Emmerich believed a man's regrets were more real than his deeds. That if you could trap all the sorrow, all the guilt, you could hold on to a piece of him forever. That's what he built the mirror for, to feed it." Rebecca pressed a hand to her mouth. "But why here? Why this inn?" "The collector who first bought it died in this house. The mirror stayed, and after that, it never left." Rebecca closed her eyes, fighting a wave of nausea. She thought of the writing in the condensation, of the child's voice, of the figure watching from behind the glass. She drew a shaky breath. "Have you ever seen it do anything?" The housekeeper's eyes went distant. "When I was a girl, I came up to clean. My mother told me not to look too long. But I was curious. I thought it was just an old mirror, so I stood in front of it. And I saw my father." Her voice grew softer. "He died before I was born. But I knew it was him. He reached out his hand to me, like he wanted me to come closer. Did you? The woman shook her head. I ran, and I never went back in that room. Until today. Rebecca swallowed. Thank you for telling me. The woman nodded once, then rose and walked away, leaving the faint scent of brass polish in her wake. Haaka's legs felt like water. She returned to room 217 and locked the door behind her. The mirror waited. She stood before it, heart pounding. I know what you are, she whispered. You think you can keep me here, but I won't let you. The glass rippled, and for an instant, the reflection changed. She wasn't standing in the bathroom anymore. She was in her childhood home, the living room flickering with firelight. The old couch, the flowered curtains, and her sister, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, playing with a doll. No, Rebecca gasped. This isn't real. But the heat of the flames felt real. The smoke burned her throat. The child looked up, her face illuminated by the rising fire. You left me, she said softly. Rebecca stumbled back, tears blurring her vision. I tried to save you. The flames climbed the walls. The doll ignited in the child's hands. But she didn't move. She only stared. I'm sorry, Rebecca sobbed. I'm so sorry. Then the fire vanished. The mirror showed only her reflection again, pale, shaking, eyes rimmed with red. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text message from an unknown number. You cannot break what you are. She sank to her knees, the photograph of her and her sister pressed to her chest. Tears splashed onto the floor. She didn't notice the shape forming in the mirror behind her. A tall figure in a black coat, watching. Rebecca didn't know how long she sat there on the bathroom floor, her face buried in trembling hands. The words in the text, you cannot break what you are, looped through her mind like a curse. Finally, she forced herself to stand. Her knees cracked, the muscles in her legs clumsy and numb. She didn't look at the mirror. She couldn't. Instead, she gathered her laptop and phone, slung her bag over her shoulder, and left room 217. The hallway was silent. The old carpet muffled her steps. For a brief, desperate moment, she thought about getting in her car and never coming back, but she knew that wouldn't save her. Wherever she went, the mirror would follow, because it wasn't just a piece of glass. It was a ledger, and she was already written in its pages. The only way out was through. She returned to the lobby. Martin Holloway wasn't behind the desk. A note sat propped on the bell. Gone to town. Back this evening. Rebecca exhaled, equal parts relief and dread. She didn't want to explain, didn't think he'd believe her anyway. She settled in one of the high-backed chairs by the fire, opened her laptop, and began searching. She needed everything she could find on Joseph Emmerich. Most of the results were dead ends, ancestry websites, genealogical footnotes. Then, buried in a university archive, she found it. A scan of the Northwestern Journal of Psychical Research, 1913 edition. Her eyes darted over the first paragraph. Joseph Emmerich's final years were consumed by his work on what he called the memory mirror, a device intended to capture and preserve the psychic residue of regret. Though most dismissed his claims as delusional, certain spiritualist circles recorded incidents suggesting that prolonged exposure to the mirror produced hallucinations, fugue states, and in some cases, permanent disappearance. Rebecca's pulse quickened. She read on. The original commission was for a railway baron, but following the patron's sudden death, the mirror remained in Emmerich's possession. He continued to refine the design, convinced that the glass could become a vessel for collective sorrow, a kind of psychic reliquary. Her gaze drifted to the photo accompanying the article. The same man, the same black coat, eyes like pits. She thought of the figure in her childhood photograph, the shape standing behind her reflection. It was him. She copied the text into a new document. As she typed, the laptop's cursor began to flicker. Then it moved on its own, skittering across the page. Letters bloomed without her touch. I see you. Rebecca slammed the lid shut, heart battering her ribs. She looked around the lobby. Empty. Quiet. But she felt watched. She pressed her palms against her eyes, willing herself to breathe. The rational part of her mind whispered that it was a hallucination, a stress response. But another part, older, more primal, knew the truth. The mirror wasn't finished with her. Outside, the sky had turned the color of bruised violets. Dusk again. How many nights had she been here? She checked her phone. 2 missed calls from Daniel. 1 new voicemail. She hesitated, then played it on speaker. Becca, it's me. I did some digging and you're not going to like this. I found 6 other cases, people who vanished after staying at the Wycliffe. No bodies. Just gone. And the dates match what you told me. 1912, 1939, 1971, 1994, 2008, 2016. It's like clockwork. Every 20 to 25 years, someone disappears. And this year makes 7. He paused, voice unsteady. Please, just leave that place. I don't care about the report. I don't care if you think I'm being irrational. Get out. Call me back. Rebecca gripped the phone so hard, her knuckles ached. 7 disappearances, a perfect pattern. And she was next. She pocketed the phone and climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When she reached room 217, her hand hovered over the doorknob. The air seeping under the door was cold as a crypt. You have to see it all. The child's voice echoed in her memory. She turned the knob. The room was dark, only the bathroom light was on, casting a pale rectangle onto the carpet. The mirror glowed faintly, as if lit from within. She stepped inside. On the floor lay a sheaf of yellowed paper, pages torn from an old ledger. Her name was written across the top in spidery black ink. Rebecca Graves, October 2023. Beneath it, a list. Ran from fire, left her behind, told no one, pretended to forget. Her throat closed. This was her confession, her sins, written before she'd ever arrived. She knelt, fingertips brushing the paper. The mirror rippled, and then she was somewhere else. A long corridor stretched ahead, walls lined with mirrors. In each reflection, she saw herself at a different age. 16, 22, 28. And in every image, she looked terrified. "You cannot break what you are," a voice murmured. She turned. Joseph Emmerich stood behind her, tall and impossibly thin, his face hidden in shadow. "You built this," she whispered. "You made it do this." He tilted his head. "I merely crafted the vessel. It is you who filled it." The corridor dissolved. She was back in room 217, on her knees. But the ledger was gone. The mirror was silent. Rebecca rose unsteadily. She had to end this. Burn it. Destroy whatever power Emmerich had bound inside. Her gaze fell on the iron fire poker beside the hearth. She crossed the room, picked it up. When she turned back to the mirror, her reflection was smiling. "It won't let you go," it whispered. She lifted the poker over her head and swung. The glass didn't break. Instead, it rippled like water, swallowing the iron rod up to the hilt. Rebecca let go, stumbled back. The mirror's surface bulged outward, something pressing against it from within, trying to emerge. A hand, pale and slender, a child's hand. Rebecca's scream echoed down the empty hall. The pale hand pressed against the inner surface of the mirror. Tiny fingers spread wide, searching, feeling for the threshold between worlds. Rebecca stumbled backward, her heel catching on the edge of the rug. She fell hard, her shoulders slamming into the wardrobe. A sharp pain bloomed down her arm, but she barely felt it over the roar of her own pulse. The hand withdrew. In its place, the little girl appeared, her hair in tangled braids, her dress scorched and blackened, and her eyes locked on Rebecca. "Come home," the child whispered. The words rippled through the room. The air turned icy, each breath burning in her lungs. Rebecca tried to stand, but her limbs wouldn't obey. It was as if the gravity of that voice pinned her in place. But you left me," the girl continued. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but behind it lurked something vast and hungry. Rebecca's teeth chattered. "I tried to save you, but you ran." The mirror pulsed. For an instant, the room vanished, replaced by flames. Smoke filled her nose, her throat. She was 16 again, standing in the doorway of her childhood home as the fire raged inside. She heard her own voice screaming her sister's name, and she heard the smaller, fainter cry from within the living room. "Becca?" The world spun. Her knees hit the floorboards. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear to God, I didn't know you were there." Soon the flames flickered out. The hotel reappeared around her, but the air still smelled of smoke. The girl's eyes never left her. "You can't leave until you remember everything," she said. Rebecca's heart thumped painfully. Remember what? But she already knew. Suddenly, the child's form flickered and shifted. The soot-stained dress elongated, becoming a black coat. The hair receded, the face aged. In the space of a single heartbeat, the girl became Joseph Emmerich. He regarded her with the same hollow stare she'd seen in every photograph. "You think this is punishment?" he murmured. "But it is absolution. You cannot run from what you are." Rebecca clenched her fists. "You did this. You trapped them all." His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I simply gave them a place to rest. Their regret is the only truth that endures." The mirror brightened. Behind Emmerich, 1,000 faces pressed against the silver surface. Men, women, children, each locked in their final, most desperate moment. They watched her with eyes full of accusation and longing. Rebecca's vision swam. "Let them go." Emmerich tilted his head. "You misunderstand. They are not prisoners. They are what remains. When the body fails and the memory endures, the ledger grows, and soon, so will you." Her breath shuddered. "No." Emmerich's form rippled. The little girl reappeared, her hand outstretched. "Come home," she repeated. The mirror's surface rippled outward, extending toward her like a liquid arm. Rebecca scrambled backward, but the tendril of silver touched her boot. Instantly, her body locked. A searing cold shot up her leg, spreading through her veins like ice. She tried to scream, but her jaw wouldn't open. The mirror drew her closer. In the glass, she saw herself, gray-skinned, hollow-eyed, already fading. "No." With a desperate surge of will, she forced her hand to move. She reached into her pocket and closed her fingers around the iron hotel key, its cold metal pressed into her palm. A small, stupid reminder that she was still alive. She clutched it like a talisman. "I am not yours," she croaked. "I will never be yours." A low hum vibrated through the room. The faces in the mirror watched, unblinking. Emmerich's voice sighed through the air. "You already are." The tendril wrapped her ankle, yanking her across the floor. Her hands scrabbled against the rug, searching for anything to anchor her. Her fingers closed around the fire poker, still slick with condensation. She wrenched it free, lifted it over her head. "You will let me go," she hissed. And she brought the poker down on the mirror's surface. The glass didn't break. Instead, it shuddered and then seemed to swallow the impact, the iron rod sinking into the silver like a stone into water. The pull grew stronger. Rebecca's body slid another foot toward the mirror. "Please," she gasped, her vision fading at the edges. "Please." The mirror's surface bulged, and Emmerich's face emerged, stretching forward until it nearly touched hers. His breath smelled of mildew and ash. "There is no forgiveness," he whispered. Rebecca's free hand scrabbled at her throat. The iron key pressed into her palm, cutting her skin. She felt something in her mind splinter. Some last reserve of strength she hadn't known she possessed. With a raw, primal scream, she drove the poker deeper. This time, the glass cracked. A fine web of fractures raced across the surface. The mirror let out a shriek so high it was almost beyond hearing. The silver tendril recoiled. Rebecca fell back, gasping. The air exploded outward, a wind so cold it scoured her lungs. When she looked up, the mirror was changing. Each face behind the glass began to blur, smearing like wet paint. The little girl reached a hand toward her. Rebecca's heart clenched. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to leave you." The child's lips moved. For the first time she smiled, and then she was gone. The mirror shattered. A roar filled the room, and darkness rushed out of the broken glass like a tide. Rebecca threw her arms over her face. When the wind died, silence fell. She lowered her hands. The mirror was gone. Only the scorched outline of its frame remained on the wall. Her body felt hollow, but she was alive. Rebecca sank to her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks. For the first time in 20 years, she felt the weight lift from her chest. But deep in her bones, she knew this wasn't over. Somewhere, somehow, Emmerich's ledger was still open, and the debt of the past was never paid in full. Rebecca didn't remember leaving room 217. One moment she was kneeling in the ruins of the mirror, tears streaking her face. The next, she was outside, the dawn wind biting her cheeks. The Wycliffe Inn loomed behind her, its windows dark and silent. A building that had watched a century of regret seep into its walls. She climbed into her car on autopilot, hands numb on the steering wheel. 30 miles later, she pulled into a gas station, the world around her finally taking shape again. She sat with the engine idling, staring at her own reflection in the rearview mirror. This time, she didn't see anyone behind her. No child, no man in the black coat. Just herself. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, her heart beat with a hollow, uneasy rhythm. At dawn, she reached Tacoma. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it, unwashed dishes in the sink, a stack of unsorted mail on the kitchen table. She turned on every light, checked each closet twice. The rooms were empty. Still, She couldn't shake the sense of being watched. That night, sleep came in shallow bursts, interrupted by dreams she couldn't remember. Each time she woke, she expected to see a silhouette in the doorway, but the darkness was empty. On the third morning, she made herself coffee, sat at her kitchen table, and began to write. Incident Report, Wycliffe Inn, Room 217, October 24th, 2023. Subject, Antique Mirror of Unknown Origin, Possible Emmerich Artifact. Object exhibited persistent visual and auditory phenomena, including but not limited to autonomous reflection, psychogenic projection of traumatic memory, and directed telepathic suggestion. Upon fracturing the object, all manifestations ceased. Current status, presumed destroyed. She paused. Presumed. The word felt dishonest. She couldn't prove what she'd seen had ended anything. She saved the file, closed the laptop. 2 hours later, her phone rang. Daniel's voice poured through the line, taut with worry. "Becca, you home? I'm here. I've been trying you for days. Are you okay?" "I don't know. Talk to me." She told him everything, her voice flat, as if narrating someone else's nightmare. When she finished, the line was silent for so long she thought he'd hung up. Then, "Jesus, Becca, you need help." "I need proof," she whispered. "I need to know it's really over." Daniel exhaled shakily. Even if it is, someone's going to come looking. That mirror wasn't just a curiosity. It was valuable, dangerous. You said yourself it was a ledger. That means it had records, maybe more than just memories. Rebecca closed her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if it really held all that psychic residue." He hesitated. "Someone will want to collect it." She thought of the 1,000 faces pressed against the glass, of the ledger pages that named her sins before she'd ever arrived. "I won't let it happen again," she said. That night, she started her own search. Not for Emmerich, he was long dead, but for anyone who might be trying to reconstruct what he'd built. 2 days later, an email arrived from an address she didn't recognize. Subject, ledger remains open. Text, you think you destroyed it, but you only broke the vessel. The debt remains, and the ledger always collects. Below the text was a single attachment, a photo. It showed a basement, cracked concrete floor, exposed pipes along the ceiling. In the center, laid out like a corpse, was a pane of silvered glass. It was fractured, but the cracks were already mending. Rebecca's heart stopped. It was still here. She scrolled back to the email. At the bottom, in tiny letters, a final sentence. "We can help you finish what you started." Her phone buzzed in her hand. A new message. No sender. Meet us. You know where. By dusk, she was back in her car. The highway stretched out before her in a smear of asphalt and headlights. She didn't know if she was being followed. Didn't know if she was chasing something or being led to it. But she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. If the mirror was rebuilding itself, it wasn't done with her. 3 hours later, she pulled into the gravel lot behind the old municipal archive building, a place she hadn't seen since college. She'd written her first research paper here on local industries. It felt like 100 years ago. She climbed the back steps, heart thudding. The air smelled of wet brick and autumn leaves. A single bulb burned above the service door. She knocked. No answer. She tried the knob. It turned easily. Inside, the air was cold. Somewhere in the dark, water dripped with a slow, hollow rhythm. She moved deeper into the archive stacks, each step echoing against the tile. At the far end, a doorway glowed with warm lamplight. Rebecca paused, every instinct screaming to run, but she went forward. In the small room beyond, a woman sat behind a metal table, studying a pile of cracked photographs. She looked up as Rebecca entered. Her face was sharp, her eyes pale and unblinking. "Miss Graves," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "We've been expecting you." Rebecca's throat closed. "Who are you?" The woman smiled faintly. "Archivists, curators, call us what you like. We preserve what others discard." She lifted one of the photos. It showed the mirror, whole again. "And we know how to finish what Emmerich began." Rebecca stepped back, shaking her head. "No, it has to end." "It will," the woman agreed softly, "one way or another." She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit, Ms. Graves. Let's discuss how you can help us." Rebecca's hand found the iron key in her coat pocket, a reminder that she still had a choice. But even as she gripped it, she felt the old fear rising. Because in her heart, she knew the ledger was still open. And sooner or later, the debt would come due. Rebecca stood in the doorway, her hand locked around the iron hotel key in her pocket. The woman behind the table waited, watching her with eyes that seemed almost colorless, gray as old paper. "Sit," she said again, her voice low and measured. "There is no reason to be afraid." Rebecca's breath shook. "I'm not staying." The woman tilted her head as though amused. "You will. You came here for answers, and you know you can't leave without them." Rebecca's pulse thumped in her ears. "I don't care about your answers. I'm going to destroy whatever is left of that mirror, for good." "You think this is about a single mirror?" The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. What Emmerich created was never just an object. It was a prototype. Rebecca swallowed, her mouth dry. Prototype for what? A way to harness what people spend their entire lives denying. Their regret. She gestured to the photographs spread across the table. Grainy images of different mirrors, all eerily similar to the one Rebecca had smashed. "There are others," the woman continued. "Some broken, some hidden, all waiting to be reassembled into something far greater." Rebecca's knees went weak. "You're rebuilding it." The woman didn't deny it. We're preserving it. What you call a curse, we call an archive of human truth. If you had seen what we've seen... Rebecca took a step back, her voice rising. No, I've seen enough. You think suffering is something to collect, to study, but all you're doing is making it stronger. And the woman sighed, as though disappointed. You misunderstand. This is not about power. This is about continuity. Humanity cannot evolve if it refuses to confront its failures. The mirror forces that confrontation. Rebecca's nails dug into her palm. It kills people. No, the woman said calmly. It reveals them. Silence thickened. Somewhere in the archive, water continued to drip, each splash echoing like a ticking clock. What do you want from me? Rebecca whispered. We need someone who has touched the mirror, someone it recognizes, someone it has marked. Rebecca's skin crawled. No. You want to use me to finish whatever Emmerich started. The woman studied her face, expression unreadable. Do you believe you destroyed it? Rebecca thought of the email, the photograph of the fractured glass, already healing. Her shoulders sagged. I don't know anymore. Then sit. Listen. Learn. If you walk away now, you will spend the rest of your life running from what you already carry inside you. Rebecca's throat closed. Some part of her wanted to turn and bolt into the night, never look back. But she knew the woman was right about one thing. Whatever had been in that mirror hadn't died when the glass broke. It had simply retreated, and it was still waiting for her. Slowly, she lowered herself into the chair across from the archivist. Her hand remained in her pocket, gripping the key like a talisman. The woman folded her hands neatly atop the table. Good, she murmured. Now we can begin. She gestured to a stack of documents bound in cracked leather. Rebecca hesitated before reaching for them. The cover read, Emmerich Codex, Volume 1. What is this? The original notes, the archivist said. His methods, his goals. The mirror in the Wycliffe was the first working model. But he envisioned dozens, each calibrated to a different resonance of guilt, sorrow, anger, remorse. Rebecca flipped the cover open. Dense columns of Emmerich's handwriting filled the page. Some words were underlined over and over. Recurrence. Echo threshold. Resonant imprint. What does this mean? She whispered. The mirror doesn't simply reflect a person's regrets. It imprints them onto the silver. It becomes a vessel. And when the vessel breaks, the imprint disperses, looking for something or someone familiar to anchor itself. Rebecca's skin prickled cold. You're saying it's inside me? The woman met her gaze without flinching. Not all of it, but some. Enough that you will never be free unless it's contained again. Rebecca closed the codex, fighting the urge to retch. Then why are you trying to rebuild it? Because if we don't, it will rebuild itself somewhere else. This isn't about greed. It's about containment. If it's left to scatter, the imprints will seed every reflective surface they touch. Every mirror, every pane of glass, every screen. The ledger will grow until it eclipses every living mind it touches. Rebecca stared at her. You expect me to help you bring it back? To complete it? So you can lock it away? The woman didn't blink. Yes, because you are already linked to it. And because you are the only person who has ever damaged it so completely. A hollow laugh escaped Rebecca's throat. You want me to be your bait? I want you to be its end, the woman corrected softly. Rebecca rubbed her eyes. Fatigue weighed on her like a wet blanket. And if I say no? You can leave, the woman said. But it will not matter. The ledger will find you again. And next time, you will not walk away. For a moment, Rebecca imagined the mirror's surface blooming across every screen, every phone, every window, an unending archive of regret, consuming the world one person at a time. Her heartbeat stuttered. If I do this, how do I know you won't use it for yourselves? Because it's not power we seek, the woman said. It's quarantine. She tapped the codex. This was never Emmerich's legacy. It was his infection. Help us end it, Ms. Graves. Rebecca closed her eyes. The face of the little girl rose in her mind, soot-stained, accusing. She thought of the iron key still clutched in her palm, of the promise she'd made to herself. Never again. She opened her eyes. What do you need me to do? The woman's smile was thin, but genuine. First, you'll need to see where the fragments are kept. She rose and crossed to a metal door set into the far wall. Rebecca stood on shaking legs and followed. The woman unlocked the door and pushed it open. And a blast of cold air washed over them. Inside, rows of shelves stretched into darkness. On each shelf sat a single object wrapped in black cloth. Dozens of them. The archivist stepped aside, gesturing her in. This is the archive. Rebecca crossed the threshold, heart hammering. She knew, without needing to be told, that behind every cloth covering was another piece of the ledger. And she had just agreed to help rebuild it. Rebecca stepped into the cold darkness of the archive. Her breath misted in the air, swirling around the rows of shelves that stretched into blackness. Each shelf held a single parcel, shrouded in heavy black cloth. Some were the size of dinner plates. Others were no larger than a hand mirror. All of them pulsed with the same low thrum she had felt in room 217, like a heartbeat, just beyond hearing. The archivist closed the door behind them. These are the known fragments, she said, recovered over the last 80 years. Some were found intact, others shattered. All of them are still active. Rebecca shivered. How many are there? In this facility? 63. Worldwide? She paused, the shadows deepening around her face. No one knows. Rebecca swallowed. You said you needed me. Why? The woman's pale gaze fixed on her. Because you are the only person who has broken the mirror and survived. That means your resonance with the ledger is unique. If we attempt to rebind the fragments without you, they will resist. They may scatter again. Rebecca closed her eyes. The iron key in her pocket dug into her palm, a cold anchor to reality. And if I help you, if we reassemble this thing, how do you stop it from spreading? Containment vault, the archivist said softly. A chamber lined with obsidian and salt. The mirror will be sealed forever. No more imprints, no more reflections. Rebecca's voice was a ragged whisper. And if you're wrong? The woman didn't flinch. Then it will end us all. But doing nothing is a guarantee of that outcome. At least this way, there is a chance. She turned and began walking down the aisle between the shelves. Rebecca followed, her footsteps echoing off the cold concrete floor. After a few paces, the archivist stopped before a shelf near the end of the room. She rested her hand on the largest, shrouded shape. This was the final shard recovered, she said. The piece from room 217? Rebecca felt her chest tighten. It survived? The archivist nodded. You broke the vessel, but the imprint within remained intact. When you left, it began to reform itself. She lifted the black cloth. Beneath it lay a pane of mirrored glass, spiderwebbed with cracks. Tiny filaments of silver wriggled along the fractures, knitting themselves together even as she watched. Rebecca took a step back. God. Touch it, the woman murmured. Rebecca stared at her. No, you must. It will recognize you. Accept the resonance. Without that connection, it will never be whole enough to seal. Her hands trembled. What if it pulls me in? Then we will pull you back, the archivist said simply. Datum. Rebecca's heart pounded. Everything in her screamed to run, to leave this place and never return, but she knew she wouldn't. Because some part of her had been bound to the ledger the moment she first stood in front of it. And there would never be peace while even a shard remained. Slowly, she extended her hand. Her fingers hovered above the cracked surface. The glass shivered, as though sensing her. She closed her eyes and touched it. At first, there was only cold. Then a sensation like falling, not through air but through memory. Scenes flickered past her in flashes. The fire, her sister's tiny soot-smeared face, Joseph Emmerich standing in the shadows. And then she was somewhere else. A chamber she had never seen. Stone walls slick with moisture. A circle of robed figures standing around a massive mirror. Their faces were hidden by hoods, but she felt their eyes on her. One stepped forward, lifting a hand. She has touched the source, a voice intoned. She is the bridge. Rebecca tried to speak, but no sound came. The figures raised their hands in unison. Light blazed around the mirror, pale and blinding. Rebecca Graves, the voice called. Bearer of the ledger. Will you complete the cycle? She wrenched her hand back with a ragged gasp. The archive snapped and back into focus. The shelves, the concrete floor, the cold. Her palm burned where she had touched the glass. The archivist watched her, expression unreadable. "What did you see?" she demanded. Rebecca shook her head, fighting to steady her breath. "People. In a circle. They were waiting. They called me the bridge." The woman's face paled. "Then it has already begun." "What?" "The ledger is not merely a container," the archivist whispered. "It is a seed. Every time it is broken, it plants something in the mind of the one who shattered it. A compulsion to finish what Emmerich could not." Rebecca's mouth went dry. "So you brought me here to, what? Complete it?" "To choose," the woman corrected. "Either help us reassemble it and seal it away, or let it continue to propagate through you. Every mirror you look into, every reflection you cast, will become another conduit." Rebecca closed her eyes. "And if I refuse both?" "Then eventually," the archivist said quietly, "it will consume you and everyone you love." Silence settled like a shroud. Rebecca looked down at the shard she had touched. Already the cracks had narrowed. Her reflection stared up at her, pale, hollow-eyed, but undeniably hers. She thought of the email, the line that had haunted her ever since. "The ledger always collects." When she looked up, her voice was hoarse but steady. "Show me what to do." The archivist inclined her head. "Then come. There is something else you must see." She led Rebecca deeper into the archive. At the far end, another door waited, this one marked with a symbol Rebecca didn't recognize. A circle bisected by a jagged line. The woman unlocked it and swung it open. A long flight of stone steps descended into darkness. "Where does this go?" Rebecca asked. The woman's eyes glinted in the dim light. "To the vault, where the first mirror waits." A chill traced Rebecca's spine. "I thought the Wycliffe mirror was the first." "No," the woman said softly. "That was only the first you encountered. But it was never the original. The prototype still exists, and it has been waiting for you a very long time." Rebecca hesitated at the threshold of the stairwell. A cold draft rose from below, carrying the smell of old stone and something harder to name. Metallic, almost sweet. The archivist watched her from the shadows. "You are afraid," she said simply. Rebecca's hand closed tighter around the iron key in her pocket. "Shouldn't I be?" The woman inclined her head, as if conceding the point. Fear is the only sane response, but it does not change what must be done. Rebecca swallowed. What happens down there? The ledger cannot be ended unless the prototype is sealed. Every fragment is tethered to it. Every echo of Emmerich's design comes from that one source. Why me? The archivist's gaze sharpened. Because you damaged the ledger more than any who came before. That means it recognizes you. It is bound to you in ways it never was to Emmerich's other subjects. Rebecca's heart beat unevenly. So I'm a... What? A conduit? A bridge, the woman corrected. The only living link strong enough to reabsorb the loose imprints and close the cycle. Rebecca took a shaky breath. And if I refuse? Then you will remain marked, and every reflection you cast will eventually become another seed, another mirror. The ledger will grow until it touches everyone. And at the thought made her stomach twist. She thought of Daniel, of everyone she might unknowingly doom. Show me, she whispered. The archivist stepped past her and began the descent. Rebecca followed, the soles of her boots scraping over slick stone. The stairwell spiraled deeper than she expected, past the level of any basement, past even the old city foundation when she remembered studying in college. She lost count of the turns. Her breath quickened in the stale air. Finally, the stairs ended in a small landing. A heavy door waited, banded in iron and etched with more symbols, circles within circles, broken lines converging on a central point. The archivist placed her palm flat against the wood. There was a muffled click. The door swung open with a sigh. Rebecca stepped inside and stopped breathing. As the chamber beyond was circular, the walls lined with shelves of black salt bricks. In the center stood a pedestal of polished obsidian. On it rested the mirror. This one was different. The glass was nearly as tall as she was, 7 feet at least, and framed in dark iron, inscribed with letters she couldn't read. It wasn't cracked. It wasn't tarnished. It looked new. The prototype, the archivist said. Her voice had lost all pretense of calm. Something like awe flickered across her face. This is where it began. Rebecca took a step closer. Her reflection emerged from the darkness, sharp and perfect. But there was no sign of the child, no sign of Emmerich, just herself. What happens now? She asked, her voice thin. You touch it, the woman said quietly. You allow it to recognize you fully. Every shard you've ever encountered, every echo you've ever felt, will be drawn back here. The cycle will complete. Rebecca's mouth was dry. And then we seal it. forever. Rebecca closed her eyes. The iron key in her hand felt heavier than ever. How do I know you're telling the truth? The archivist's expression was almost sad. Don't. But you came here because you already know what will happen if you walk away. Silence filled the vault, thick and absolute. Rebecca stared into her reflection, and for the first time, she wondered if Emmerich had ever believed he was creating evil. Or if, like her, he'd simply tried to hold back something no one could understand. As she took one more step, the mirror's surface shimmered. Just once, like something breathing. What if it consumes me? The woman's gaze didn't waver. Then at least it ends with you. Rebecca drew a shuddering breath. She thought of her sister's face in the flames, of the 1,000 other faces pressed against the glass. Maybe this was the only way to put them to rest. If this doesn't work, we will all know soon enough, the archivist finished. Rebecca nodded. Slowly, she lifted her hand. Her palm hovered an inch above the cold silver. I'm not afraid, she whispered, though her heart thundered in her chest. The mirror rippled. Her reflection's lips parted, speaking words she couldn't hear. And then she touched it. Cold flooded her, not physical cold, but something deeper, a freezing of thought, of memory, of self. Her vision went white. When it cleared, she was no longer in the vault. She stood in a vast, dark hall. Pillars rose into blackness. The floor was polished like a lake. All around her, reflections waited, each one a version of herself, some older, some younger, some that looked as if they had never known happiness. They spoke in unison, a chorus of her own voice. You are the bridge. You are the debt unpaid. You are the echo made flesh. Becca tried to turn, but the space had no walls, only endless darkness. A shape detached itself from the shadows, tall, thin, a black coat trailing across the floor. Joseph Emmerich. His eyes gleamed as he approached. At last, he said, voice echoing everywhere. We are together. Rebecca swallowed her fear. Why me? Because you broke the mirror. You showed it that nothing is eternal. Now it must bind itself to you, or perish. His hand lifted, palm open. Take my hand. Complete the ledger. Rebecca's vision flickered, images exploding across her mind. The faces she had seen in every reflection. The endless cycle of guilt and regret. And beneath it all, the truth she hadn't dared to consider. It had never been about her guilt. It had been about survival. The mirror had always needed a host. Her. Emmerich stepped closer. "Join me," he whispered. "Become the vessel." Rebecca felt her knees buckle. She looked past him, toward the countless reflections, watching, waiting. If she took his hand, it would end the cycle. But she would be the price. "I'm not yours," she whispered. She clenched the iron key in her fist so hard the metal cut her skin, and she made her choice. Rebecca stood in the darkness, the iron key biting into her palm. Emmerich towered before her, hand outstretched. All around them, the reflections of herself waited, silent witnesses to the final choice. "Join me," Emmerich repeated, his voice filling the endless hall. "Become the vessel. End the scattering." Her mind felt split in two. Part of her saw the logic. If she allowed herself to merge with the ledger, it would finally be contained. No more fragments, no more echoes, no more seeds waiting to root in some unsuspecting soul. But the rest of her recoiled in horror. She would be erased, her memories consumed, her will dissolved into Emmerich's archive of guilt. "No," she whispered, "Annette, I won't let you have me." Emmerich's expression did not change. "You misunderstand. There is no other path. You broke the mirror. You are the anchor. Without you, it will remain incomplete, spreading itself across every reflective surface it touches." He stepped closer. The reflections moved with him, an infinite army of hollow-eyed Rebecca Graves. "Take my hand," he urged, "or watch your world drown in regret." Her breath came ragged. "What if I refuse?" "Then every fragment will search for you," Emmerich intoned. "And when they find you, they will remake you in my image, piece by piece. You will become the ledger, whether you consent or not." She clenched her jaw, her body trembling. She remembered the faces pressed against the Wycliffe mirror, the little girl's voice, the knowledge that none of them had escaped. They were all here, still watching, still waiting. But she also remembered the moment she'd smashed the glass. How, for a heartbeat, the ledger had seemed afraid. It wasn't invincible. Rebecca lifted her gaze to Emmerich's pale eyes. What happens if I destroy you? For the first time, his expression flickered. Something like amusement, but edged with contempt. You cannot. I am only the echo of what began. Even if you shatter this reflection, the ledger persists. It will grow again. Unless there's no one left to remember it. His brow furrowed. What are you saying? Rebecca took a slow step back. You think you need me to survive, but you're wrong. You need my fear, my guilt. You need me to believe you're inevitable. Her voice grew stronger. What if I don't? What if I refuse to carry you any further? Emmerich's hand lowered an inch. You cannot unbind yourself. You are marked. Maybe, she said softly, but I can still choose not to be yours. The iron key dug deeper into her flesh. Blood ran between her fingers. Emmerich stepped closer, urgency sharpening his voice. Take my hand. It is the only way. No, she breathed. She tightened her grip on the key and flung it forward, into the mirror behind him. The moment the iron touched the silver, the darkness exploded. A shriek erupted. Not Emmerich's voice, not hers, but a chorus of every reflection, every soul ever trapped in the ledger. The reflections convulsed, their forms blurring into smears of smoke. Cracks raced across the floor, the pillars, the ceiling. Emmerich staggered, his face dissolving into 1,000 flickering images, his own regrets, his own failures. Fool, he roared. You will destroy everything. Rebecca fell to her knees, clutching her head as light poured from every fracture. She felt her memories tearing free, snatched into the cracks by invisible hands. Her childhood, her sister's laughter, the smell of summer grass, her first kiss, the moment she ran from the fire. No, she gasped. I won't let you take them. Somewhere beyond the breaking darkness, she felt a choice open in her mind. Two paths: yield and let the ledger devour her, or sever every tie to it, even if it meant losing herself. I'm sorry, she whispered, to every memory she'd ever cherished. And she chose. The hall erupted in white. When she opened her eyes, she was on the floor of the vault. Her hands were empty. The iron key was gone. The pedestal was bare. The prototype had vanished. The archivist knelt beside her, one hand pressed to her shoulder. Rebecca, she said, voice raw. Can you hear me? Rebecca swallowed. Her mind felt hollow, scraped clean. What What happened? The woman exhaled shakily. You severed it. The ledger cannot bind itself to you anymore, or to anyone else. Rebecca tried to sit up. Her body felt weightless, as if she were little more than a shadow. Is it gone? Sure. The archivist hesitated. I don't know. I have studied this curse all my life, and I have never seen it do this. Rebecca looked around the vault, at the salt bricks lining the walls, the empty pedestal. If I destroyed it, why do I feel like something is still watching me? The woman's gaze softened. Because you remember. Because part of you will always wonder if it truly ended. That is what regret does, Rebecca. It survives even when the mirror is gone. Tires blurred her vision. Then what was the point? That you chose, the archivist said, and that, for the first time, you didn't run. Silence wrapped around them, a silence that felt almost like peace. After a while, Rebecca stood. Her legs shook, but she stayed upright. The woman watched her carefully. Will you leave now? Rebecca thought of her apartment, of Daniel, of the 1,000 tiny reflections waiting in every window, every polished surface. No, she whispered. Not yet. She turned to face the empty pedestal. There are other fragments, other places it touched. If this is really over, I have to know. The archivist inclined her head. Then you will have our help. Rebecca nodded once, resolute. For the first time since she'd stepped into room 217, she felt the weight in her chest ease. Not because she was free, but because she finally understood. The ledger could only win if she surrendered to her fear. And she was done being afraid, and the vault was quiet when Rebecca finally turned away from the pedestal. Her heartbeat still hadn't steadied. She felt hollow, scraped clean, as if some piece of her had been left behind in that blinding white void. But she was alive, and she was free. At least, freer than she'd been since the first night she stepped into room 217. You should rest, the archivist said softly. You've given more than anyone before you. Rebecca studied the salt brick walls. It's not over. The woman's mouth tightened. No, it never is. Rebecca closed her eyes, pressing her palm to her chest as if to feel whether her heartbeat was really her own. I need to know if any other fragments remain. If there are echo seeds, like you called them. The archivist inclined her head, as if she had been expecting this. Come with me. They left the vault in silence, climbed the endless spiral stairs back into the archive hall. By the time they reached the top, Rebecca's muscles burned. She didn't complain. She had chosen this. The woman led her to a small office tucked behind the rows of shelves. Inside, a single bulb illuminated a wide corkboard covered in pinned photographs. Rebecca stepped closer, scanning each image. A hand mirror in an estate sale in New Orleans. A broken shard displayed in a London museum. a polished silver compact in a private collection in Kyoto. Dozens of fragments, some she'd never heard of, others that looked eerily familiar. "We have confirmed 27 pieces that never made it to this facility," the archivist said. "Some are inert, some are still active." Rebecca's stomach clenched. "How do you know which is which?" When the prototype was whole, the fragments were all bound to it. They vibrated at the same resonance. But now, the woman hesitated. Now they are adrift. Some may simply decay into inert matter, but others may begin to evolve. "Evolve?" Rebecca whispered. "Each fragment contains an imprint, a memory echo. Separated from the source, those echoes will seek new hosts, the same way the ledger reached for you. But without an anchor, they may become something else. Not reflections, not ledgers. Just predators." Rebecca pressed a hand over her mouth. She thought of the thousands of mirrors in the world, the countless screens and reflective surfaces. How do we stop them? The archivist picked up a small case from the desk, a battered leather box that looked older than either of them. She flipped it open, revealing a set of delicate silver instruments, pincers, files, tiny hammers. By finding them, by neutralizing them before they can root in someone else. Rebecca felt the hollowness inside her fill with something steadier, resolve. "Then we start now." 3 days later, she boarded a flight to New Orleans. Her body was exhausted, but her mind was clear. In her carry-on bag was a single, carefully packed toolkit, borrowed from the archivists, and a photograph of her first target, a hand mirror with a silver back, rumored to have belonged to Emmerich's earliest patron. The estate sale had listed it innocently enough. Antique mirror, minor tarnish, sold as is. But the listing included a detail that made her blood run cold. A thin crack across the surface, radiating from the center, resembling a spider web. She knew that pattern. She had seen it every night since the Wycliffe. The plane shuddered as it descended into humid Louisiana air. Rebecca tightened her seatbelt and closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she thought she glimpsed Emmerich's face. But it faded, leaving only her own reflection staring back. When she stepped into the terminal, the air wrapped around her like a wet shroud. She felt the familiar tug at the edges of her consciousness, the sense that something was watching her, testing the boundaries of her mind. She forced herself to breathe. "You can't have me anymore," she murmured. The estate was a crumbling Victorian on the outskirts of the French Quarter. Spanish moss dripped from the iron fence. A handwritten sign hung from the gate. "Estate sale. All must go." Rebecca hesitated on the walkway, her hand resting on the iron latch. Every instinct screamed that she was walking back into the nightmare she had just escaped. But she didn't turn away. Inside, a bored-looking man handed her a price list. "Mirrors in the front parlor," he said, not glancing up from his phone. She nodded and moved past rows of tarnished silver and peeling portraits. When she entered the parlor, she stopped breathing. 4 mirrors leaned against the wall, but only one had that spiderweb fracture. The glass seemed to pulse as she approached. Not visibly, but in some deep place inside her, she felt it. Recognition. "You remember me?" she whispered. Her reflection shimmered. For an instant, she thought she saw the child again, her sister's face peering out from behind the cracks. Rebecca's throat tightened. I'm sorry, she breathed. She unzipped the toolkit, lifted a fine silver file. Her hands were steady. Not this time, she said aloud, and she began to score the glass along the fracture, careful and precise. As she worked, she felt the mirror pushing back, like a current pressing against her thoughts. 1,000 whispered regrets tried to slip under her skin. You left me. You failed. You will always fail. She ignored them. Each scrape of the file made the voices fainter. When the last line was cut, she pressed a vial of black salt into the fracture and sealed it with liquid resin. The moment the resin touched the silver, the pressure lifted. Silence fell. Rebecca stepped back, heart thundering. The mirror no longer pulsed. Her reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, but free. One down, she whispered. However many to go. She gathered her tools and left the house without looking back. As she stepped into the sunlight, she realized she was smiling. Not because the work was over. She knew it had only just begun. But because, for the first time, she was the one hunting the ledger. And she would not stop. 2 months later, Rebecca stepped off a train in London, the December air raw against her cheeks. Her bag was heavier than she remembered, or maybe it was just the weight of what she carried inside her. The archivists had traced this fragment to a private collection. An eccentric antiquarian who'd acquired it from a museum liquidation decades earlier. The photo she'd been sent showed a silvered shard no larger than a dinner plate, mounted in an ornate brass frame. But the crack across its face was unmistakable. She felt it the moment she entered the building, a pressure behind her eyes, a sense that the shard knew she was coming. The owner was a tall, gaunt man with nicotine-stained fingers and the pale, blinking gaze of someone who rarely left their books. "I was told you were an appraiser," he said, voice rasping with disuse. "Something like that," Rebecca replied. He gestured toward the study. "It's through there. No one else has touched it in 30 years. She stepped into the study. At the far end, the fragment rested on a velvet cloth. Even from across the room, she felt its pull, faint but insistent. A part of her wanted to run, but she knew she wouldn't. As she crossed the floor, her reflection resolved in the glass, smaller than before, but no less watchful. She set down her toolkit and took a breath. Let's finish this. She worked in silence, her gloved hands steady as she scored the fracture lines and packed the salt. With every scrape of the file, the air seemed to lighten. When she pressed the final seal into place, the pressure vanished, like a held breath finally released. She exhaled shakily and turned to leave. But as she reached the door, her gaze fell on a small yellow journal lying half buried under a stack of papers. Her heart stilled. Stamped across the front in faded ink were the words, "Property of J. Emmerich." Slowly, she picked it up. The first page was covered in the tight, slanted script she recognized all too well. To hold a man's regret is to hold his truest thought. In reflection, all lies fall away. She turned the page, scanning the entries. Descriptions of experiments, notes on resonance, diagrams of the mirror's construction. And then, in the final pages, something she hadn't expected. The prototype is not my only creation. The first reflection was born before I perfected the process. A smaller vessel, flawed but alive. It was the mirror I used to test the binding, to see if memory could be separated from flesh. The experiment succeeded, but I lacked the courage to finish it. Her hands trembled. The first reflection. She flipped to the next page, her pulse pounding. I have hidden it away. Should anyone attempt to destroy the ledger, the first reflection will awaken. It will begin again. This is the safeguard. The cycle cannot be broken. Rebecca's vision blurred. She read the lines again, her stomach twisting. If this was true, destroying the ledger hadn't ended anything. It had only triggered the next phase. She set the journal down and pressed her palms over her eyes. No, she whispered. I won't let you take this from me. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from the archivist. Have you finished in London? She didn't reply. Instead, she lifted her gaze to the mirror fragment. Her reflection stared back, calm, unblinking. For an instant, she thought she saw movement behind her own eyes. A flicker of something older, colder. I'm not your vessel, she breathed. Not anymore. That night, she boarded a flight back to Seattle. The journal lay wrapped in cloth in her bag, heavier than any artifact she'd carried before. When she arrived at the archivist's compound, dawn was just breaking. She walked into the main hall without waiting for permission. The archivist looked up from her desk, eyes widening at the sight of the journal. You found it, she said softly. I found something worse, Rebecca replied. She set the journal down, opened it to the final entry. It was never just about the ledger. There's another mirror, the first reflection. He left it as a failsafe. The archivist's expression turned grim. Where? He doesn't say, but if it's true, if it's waking up, then none of this mattered. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the woman closed the journal. Then we will find it. And we will finish what he began. Rebecca met her gaze. "No," she whispered. "We'll finish what I began. We end this. All of it." Three weeks later, they tracked the first reflection to a monastery in the Pyrenees, a place older than any record of Emmerich himself. The mirror was sealed behind iron gates, buried in salt and scripture. But when Rebecca stepped into the vault, she felt it stir. It knew her, and she knew it. Her reflection rose to meet her, tall and thin, eyes black as oil. Not Emmerich, herself, but twisted, hollowed out, the version of her that might have been, if she had chosen to become the ledger's vessel. "You came at last," the thing whispered. "We are inevitable." Rebecca lifted the last vial of salt and the iron key she had carried across oceans. Her voice was steady. "No, you are finished." She stepped forward, and for the final time, she touched the glass. The vault vanished in a roar of white. She felt the last memories tear themselves free. The fire, her sister's scream, her own guilt, all of it washed away in a tide of light. When she opened her eyes, she was alone. The mirror was gone. No fragments, no reflections. Only her. The archivist's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Rebecca? Did it work?" She closed her eyes, letting the quiet fill her. "It's over," she said softly. "Really over." For the first time in her life, she believed it. She turned and walked back into the dawn. Years later, no one remembered the ledger. No one spoke the name Emmerich. And if a mirror ever cracked in an empty house, or a reflection ever lingered too long, well, no one could prove anything. But in a small apartment in Tacoma, a woman with silver in her hair kept no mirrors. She didn't need them anymore. She knew exactly who she was. And she had nothing left to fear.